So the people that took the summative yesterday, this is there were some common mistakes made. One of the reasons why I think that there are some common mistakes made was that I'm just wondering if people actually watch the videos. I know that some of you did bad on the videos, but I come in there and their lunch today, vegetables, etc. To start finishing those. I called for you yesterday too. So just go get your lunch fit period and come straight here. Along that Mr. Young, we've got to get you caught up. But what I think is one of the problems is that I don't know if people really paying attention to the videos, and where they weren't, you all weren't explaining your answers very clearly and fully. Right? So I got to go over this with you before I can integrate you into the full class here. So we're going to review this. Now, this is the first question. For the two of you who haven't seen this yet, the first question says something about this right here. This is a tweet actually from an organization called Move On. And it's saying something about the NRA. Now I'll find out if you know what the NRA is in just a second, but new polling shows that the NRA is out of touch with gun owners and their own members. Then it gives you a link, then it gives you a hashtag. 2 out of 3 gun owners say that they would be more likely to vote for a candidate who supports background checks. That's what the first question on the test was about, right? So, yes. Box. Background. What should you know about the NRA? Make sure you have a pencil out. NRA stands for National Rifle Association. Next page. Okay. So number one test taking tip is if you have an open note test and you see something you don't understand or know, look it up. Right, look up what's the internet. That's one of the most important things. Like you see these things over here, it says what makes a source credible, why do you trust some sources, you check out other sources, you examine the evidence, but number one right here says know who is behind the info, so you should know who and what this is about. The whole purpose of this is to make sure that you all are confused and fooled by misinformation, right? Okay, so that you don't believe lies that you see on social media and the news, etc. Right? Now, my question is, do you know, is the NRA conservative or liberal? If you know anything about gun ownership in this country, you'll know that people who fight for gun owners' rights, and that's what they do, they're trying to expand the rights of gun owners. They want there to be fewer restrictions on the rights of gun owners to own weapons. If you know anything about this society, that means that they are conservative, which means they tend to vote Republican. So what do you think? Concerning background checks, what do you think that the NRA as an organization would think about if you want to buy a gun, you go to Walmart and you go to Dick's Sporting Goods, you go to Cabela's, or you go to one of those downtown pawn shops, which I would not recommend for buying a gun, just saying. What do you think the NRA would think about them saying, okay, you want a gun? Sign this paper. We're going to do an FBI background check on you, and you have to wait 30 days. Do you think the NRA would support that? Or no? No, they would not. They would say, don't do that because that does not expand gun owners' rights. That actually gets in the way of gun owners' rights. Okay, so that's what the NRA is. The NRA wants fewer background checks, less restrictions on gun owners. This is what typical conservatives will tell you. Now, the meme that you saw, or the tweet that you saw, is from an organization called Move On. One of the biggest keys that you have to understand about these sources that you use is you have to find out who is behind the information. What is their agenda? Who are they as a group? So, do any of you know anything about Move On? Move On is a liberal interest group, which means they would tend to vote Democrat. They help create petitions online that people will sign online to get all sorts of what they call progressive changes to happen. Now, liberals tend to want to have more restrictions on gun ownership. Liberals would tend to say gun violence is caused by these fewer restrictions. We need more restrictions on guns and ownership of guns so that we can have fewer mass killings. Got me? Follow me so far? Okay. Meaning that when it comes to background checks, they would more likely Move On, and other liberal groups would be more likely to say, okay, let's have more background checks. Okay, now, before we go any farther on this is one of the big keys up here. And I keep this up, I'm going to keep this up all year because you need to know who's behind the information. Move On is the group that came up with this. How do you find out the information that I just gave you about both of these organizations? Any ideas? How would I search out and figure out who the NRA is and who Move On is? What would I have to do? Yeah? Okay, and do what? Read the bio is good. Right? That's what some people do, and some people don't care about that. I would recommend, at least in this class, and if you don't want to be deceived by people, to read the bio, right? On a website, if you go to their website, click on the About area, or the About Us area. And that's what I did for Move On. And Move On says specifically, we champion progressive causes, which means we are liberal, which in this case means we want more background checks. Read what they say about themselves. A lot of times, they'll be upfront with you and tell you, here's what we are. They're trying to be transparent. But sometimes people want to make themselves look better than they actually are because they have some kind of hidden agenda, right? You can read the bio of the Twitter page or whatever, but that's not always everything. So I've recommended to students, if you want to know more about an organization, type in that organization's name and then type sponsor or donors. Find out who has given them money. Which I'm going to try to show you a little bit about in just a minute. When you get that list of who's giving them money, then you might know a little bit something more about them. So the question then is, do you have any questions about that? That was kind of basic stuff. Do you have any questions? Okay. Does that make common sense to you? Okay. Now, here's the question. The first question asks, what might be a good thing, a positive thing about this image? What good information might you get out of it? And some people said, there's a link to an outside source. I think that person in that period said that. There's a link to an outside source, which means that there's a statistic there that you can fact check. That's good. If you have a claim being made on a website and they don't give you a link to go check it out, then you can guess that website's pretty shady. Or as you say, sketch. You say sketch? Is that what you say? Sus. That's what you say. That's your slang word, sus. Have you said it was sus in the past? Yeah. Okay. Got me. Why does this matter? Because an unreliable source might try to hide something from you. And I put this one up here, especially for you, Cole, because when you were looking at this one, you say it seemed legit. right? But anything can seem legit. There are people that are spending millions of dollars to make things look legit, and it's not. So it can't seem legit by just looking at it. It can't look cool. It can't be something that you feel looks good, because a lot of times our feelings and what we think looks cool will deceive us, right? In order to be a good digital citizen, you've got to do some work, unless you are okay with being lied to, which I guess then I don't think that's on you. Now, what might be bad about this image? Anything that might be bad about this image? Do you have any sense, given what I've talked about so far? Let me rehash. Move on made this about the NRA. Anything? Any guesses of what might go the home? Well, it is biased. You know what bias means? Any of you? Four-letter word, bias, yeah. Very one-sided, slanted opinion. Move on is liberal, talking about conservative NRA. You see the inherent bias there. I'm not saying that they're wrong. The NRA might be out of touch with blah, 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 with gun owners in there. They might be. But automatically you can see that it's not a liberal source talking about a liberal group. It's a liberal group talking about conservative group. And you know that liberals and conservatives fight all the time. Now, I wonder if you can fill in the next blanks. Can you tell me what you think should go in the next blank? It's a blank source making a judgment about a blank group. Move on is a what? Liberal or conservative? Liberal making a judgment about a conservative group. There you go. Is move on impartial? Meaning, is move on fair and balanced and has no prejudice against this other? Well, no, of course not. Right? Again, that doesn't mean they're wrong, but that's something you need to keep in mind. Are you with me? That's basically my rehashing of that question. And I'm going over this because a lot of the answers that I got from people were, well, not thinking along these lines. Okay? So this is how I want you to think about these kind of issues. Do you have any questions then? Okay, the second question people did, the Margaret Sanger one, people did really good on. So I don't feel the need to go over it, so I'll be interested to see how you two do it, and when you turn in yours, what you said about it too. Right? I'm going to the third section now. This is the last section. And this is what it looked like. It asks you to go to this website, and the website is about minimum wage, facts and analysis. And on this right here, Denmark's $40.41 menu is basically saying that because of minimum wage in Denmark, people like you and me are having to pay more money for a Big Mac. Right? If you have to pay McDonald's workers $15 an hour, do you think the CEOs of McDonald's are going to, if the minimum wage went from $10 to $15, do you think the CEOs of McDonald's are going to take a pay cut to make up for that difference? No, they're going to pass the cost on to the consumer. So you'll have to pay more for the same sandwich because of minimum wage. That's what this is saying. Okay? So obviously the implication is, what do you think they think about the minimum wage? Raise it or don't raise it? Don't raise it, because it'll hurt people like you and I. Right? Okay, so that's what it's saying. Is this a credible site? Well, the first thing the answer is kind of. Some ways yes, in some ways no. In order to find out more about it, you would have to go to the About section of that minimum wage website, right? Go to the About section. Then you click on the link that's there. Let me go back. There it is, About. And then it says, when you click on About, you get this. And it says minimum wage is a project about the employment of the Employment Policies Institute. So I would recommend then clicking on this to find out more about this. Find out who's behind the info, click on that. Well, who is the EPI? And when you do that, you get this. You get the EPI website. And then, oops, that should be circled around About Us. Sorry. You click on that About Us to find more about this organization. And when you do that, you see this. And if you read through this, you're like, oh, it's a nonprofit. Okay, all right, that's fine. Search says quantify the impact of new labor costs on job creation, and your brain starts to you see nonpartisan there maybe, and your brain starts to cloud over it because there's a lot of big words, and they must be legit because there's all these big words, right? Well, when you start to research them, a little bit more, you just do what I told you to do a couple slides ago. Click, type out that name of that group and then put sponsor. You'll find something like this. This is a New York Times article. The guy who is in charge of that organization is Richard B. Berman. And if you read about Richard B. Berman, he has a lot of money given to him, a lot of donations given to him by the restaurant industry. Now, pause. What did the first website say about the minimum wage? Raise it or lower it. Keep it down, right? He's paid to make that website. This guy's paid to make that website by the restaurant industry. Tell me, do you think that the owners of Kentucky Fried Chicken, Panera, Panda Express, Starbucks, do you think that they're out there saying, yeah, we want to pay more money to work? No, because that means less profits, right? So he's being paid by people who want there to be a minimum wage to write things about the minimum wage. Do you see how there might be an apparent conflict of interest there, how he might be biased there a little bit? The people who are paying him are having something to do with what his message is. So is it a credible website? Well, maybe not. Why? One word. Bias. It's one-sided. It's like he's being paid. Next page, right? He's being paid to be one-sided on this issue. That doesn't necessarily mean he's wrong, but it's something that you should know. And notice how much digging I had to go through in order to get this. It takes a little bit of effort. Keep going. Keep going. There you go. Now, you might do even more digging, and you might find, all the statistics that they're saying here, even though he's biased, he's actually correct about the minimum. You might find that, right? But it would be a good idea for you to know this. Now, the very last question asks about lateral reading. And I would hope that you would do this when you encounter a source like that, like any of these sources, like any of the sources that you're going to be using in this class for the rest of the year. Do you know what lateral reading is? What's lateral reading, people that are listening online? Yeah, vertical is up and down. Lateral is horizontal, side to side, right? In other words, you're on this web page. Do you find out if the web page is credible by just reading the web page? Well, no, the whole thing might be screwy, right? So you open up a new browser and you start researching. What they say, using some of these things that I just taught you, which I think makes a certain amount of common sense. I think that this is something that you all probably know. What I'm not seeing is this explained well in the test. And that's what I need to see from you. don't read vertically up and down one page. Read laterally, checking many different sites. So not up and down, but side to side, new browser, and then not one, but many. Many because you might find one that agrees with the source, you might find one that disagrees with the source. So, okay. Now we have the last slide, the last page. For you three that haven't turned this in yet, this is going to be helpful for you. For you, this is going to help me figure out, did what I say make sense? All of you are going to prove to me that you're paying attention, that you do have it up here, which I know you all do. So what I want you to do, using lateral reading, determine whether or not this source is a credible one. That first move on image, that very first one on here, I want you now to get out your Chromebook, open it up, tell me whether or not you think this is credible, writing at least 3 sentences. You can tell me it's credible or not credible or kind of in the middle, either, whatever, but you need to tell me why in 2 sentences, okay? The writing needs to be done on here, and you turn this in before you go. Okay? But you'll need a Chromebook. Discover whether to move on. Move on. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to help you. All you got to do is ask. Chromebooks, you can use your phone so I don't give you a Chromebook charge penalty.